it's not every day you get to meet a trailblazer. And rest assured, Monique Frize is a trailblazer. She's written her autobiography looking back at her personal life and her 60 years of being a woman in engineering. So what do I mean by trailblazer? Well, in 1966, she became the first woman to graduate in engineering at the University of Ottawa. She would go on to work in the field of biological engineering in Montreal and then in a leadership role in New Brunswick. She entered academia as a professor of electrical engineering in 1989 at the University of New Brunswick before coming back to Ottawa in 1997, where she grew up, to teach at both the University of Ottawa and Carleton University in the fields of information technology, as well as systems and computer engineering. And in between, she was inducted into the Order of Canada, not only for her work in the field of biomedical engineering, but also for being a role model and an inspiration for women seeking careers in science. In 2002, she helped found the International Network of Women Engineers and Scientists. And these days, she's a distinguished research professor and professor emeritus at Carleton University. Her autobiography is called A Woman in Engineering, Memoirs of a Trailblazer. Monique Frize joins us now from her home in Ottawa. Good morning.
Good morning.
So I should give full disclosure to our listeners that I was once your student at Carleton in engineering in your ethics class, 4th year, I believe.
Yes, that's amazing because I think it was the first year I was teaching it, and there were 400 people there, so I'm sorry I couldn't remember you.
That's perfectly okay. I completely understand. But we should just have gotten that out of the way because it would be ironic with the ethics involved. Anyway, quite the list of accomplishments and achievements there. Take me back to when you first decided you wanted to become an engineer. What was it that drove you to want to be that?
Yes, well, first of all, when I was in school, like elementary and secondary school, I really didn't like grammar and history. It was really boring the way it was taught, especially Latin, and I wanted to learn, living languages, and I was very interested in mathematics and science. So I really, when I decided to go into science in 1959, entered first year at University of Ottawa, general science degree, and the first 2 years were general. And I was going to go into chemistry, but I really didn't like chemistry. And then I met this young man, Philippe Arvizet, who was in electrical engineering. And in my book, I explain how he really brought me to his lab, showed me what he was doing, and I was so excited. And I said, that's for me. Electrical engineering. So that's how I got into it.
What was it about electrical engineering?
Well, it was funny. I think he had a signal generator, and he was, doing all kinds of signals on it. And I really, since I really didn't like chemistry, and I was in a degree program, I really thought this was much, much better. So I switched. What
was the reaction when you announced you wanted to study engineering?
Oh, my goodness. I mean, even my dad said, thought I was crazy. And some of the professors and the dean tried to discourage me, saying, girls do chemistry. And, but after a while, I persisted. My father would say I was stubborn. I'd say I was very persistent in my goals. And so I decided to do it anyway. But then everybody was so proud, when I finished. It was amazing to see the change that I'd done it,
And as we discover in your book, Monique, you would go on to marry that man, Philippe, who introduced you to engineering, but tragedy strikes the family.
Yes, in fact, I really was just starting my 3rd year of engineering when he was killed in a car accident on the 401. He was going to an engineering conference for the day, and and I was in the lab, and he was going to come and pick me up at my parents' place at 5 o'clock, and of course, that never happened. It was a very, very hard time because I had to do 3rd year, 4th year, and 5th year by myself. But, because of him, I kept going, and I thought I will get my iron ring, for him and me. Our dream together, will become reality. But it was very hard, I have to tell you.
Mm-hmm. You carried on working in the field in biomedical engineering. What was it like for you entering the field like that in the late 60s, early 70s as a woman?
Yes, well, first of all, I had a job in Montreal in a telephone company as an engineer, communications engineer. And I was so unhappy doing that. Then I decided to apply for the Athlone Fellowship to go to England, Imperial College. And I got the scholarship, and I went to England, and that's when I did the biomedical engineering degree. And my happiest days were in London. That was like 1967, and he died in 63, so it was already 4 years later. And on the boat, on the way to England, on the ship, I met my second husband, and so the whole story ends up, positive in the end. And 2 years later, we had a wonderful son, Patrick. So, life picked up from there.
Mm-hmm. And working in the field as a woman?
Yes, I really came back to Montreal, and I found a job at Notre Dame Hospital as a clinical engineer, and stayed there 7 years. And then the position opened as a head of department in Moncton. So I moved there in 1979 with Patrick and Peter, my husband Peter and my son Patrick. And that was wonderful, 10 years. But in the meantime, I was finishing my doctorate in Holland. And then after that, I was tempted by an academic job, a position which I got at University of New Brunswick. And that has been my absolutely best favorite part of my career, I must say.
Why so?
Well, because now I was sharing my knowledge of 18 years of biomedical engineering in hospitals with students. And so that for me was wonderful. They were learning from all my stories and my experiences, and I was doing research in a very serious way. So that and being with students and supervising thesis, that was a wonderful part of my life, especially also the chair. The chair for women in engineering opened a whole world for me. I mean, I never met women before because, I was always the only woman around at my level. But then I started to meet women all over the country who were engineering students or in academia or working in women engineers. And to me, that was the most wonderful part of my job, to be able to, impress my views and not to be bullied. And, so I was able to do well. But it's easier now, I think, for young women because there are more women around and they can have role models and mentors, which didn't exist in my time.
But what led you to being an organizer, a leader in changing this? For example, I said you're helping found the International Network of Women Engineers and Scientists.
Yes, well, I always believed that strength is in unity. That was my motto. And when I found that things were moving so slowly, and they still are, by the way. There's still a lot of problems with the culture in engineering schools and in the workplaces. There are good workplaces, and there are really bad ones for women engineers. And so I decided I have to work with colleagues, and we created this big international network, which 20 years later still exists and is doing well. But also I created something else which I'm even more proud of, is the Canadian Institute of Women Engineers and Scientists, because now a big project we have is to collect the archives of women in these fields. And women, as you know, are invisible in books and in, generally in history. So I want people to find the papers of women and write their stories. So we're working with historians, archivists across the country, and with the U.S. as well. And later we'll expand a little bit more internationally. But to me, that is my most fun project, and I'm president of that since its foundation. And I hope I'll be there for a couple more years, active, and then pass the flame to younger ones.
You are still very active, as I mentioned, still teaching, still doing what you've done for so many years, but also closing in on retirement, sort of, as some do. And in your book, you talk about practicing how to retire. What's that about?
I know, that is kind of interesting, because I was so active, 24/7 almost, and I was worried about retirement. I was on something like 12, 14 committees, sometimes 15 to 20 master's, PhD students, teaching 2-3 courses a year and all these other activities on women. So I figured, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? So my friends and colleagues were also worried about me because they said, well, we can't see you do that. But I asked my 2 deans at Ottawa U and Carleton to let me go to Florida for 3 months, 2 years in a row in the winter term. So I taught all my courses in the autumn, fall term, and then I took off for 3 months. And, it's funny because I wrote more papers, published 19 papers that first year. I even did, thesis defenses by internet with Carleton and Ottawa U. They had a system where I could do that. So that was fantastic. So then I decided, okay, I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to retire. It allowed me to finish my book, The Bold and the Brave, my first one, which is 2,000 Years of Women in Science and Engineering. I was more productive. And then I retired in June 2010, but I continued research and students, and I published 4 more books during those 10 years, and I started painting classes, and I have more balance now with friends and family. So retirement practice told me I could do it and I could be really happy.
Well, we're really happy for you that you've got the memoir out, the autobiography. It's very inspiring. I'll give details to it. Monique, a pleasure talking to you. All the best to you in all the things you're doing.
Well, thank you, Giacomo. So nice to speak to you again after 20 years in my class.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
I think it was a little more than 20. She's being very generous there. That was Monique Frize, Order of Canada recipient, distinguished research professor and professor emeritus at Carleton University, and founding member of the International Network of Women Engineers and Scientists. Monique Frize, her last name spelled Frize, if you're Googling that. Her autobiography is titled A Woman in Engineering, Memoirs of a Trailblazer.